Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where we just don't have any of that fake news stuff going on like your mainstream media does. Anyway, today's show, I would like to deal with psychopaths. But I would like to do this in an interesting and different manner. I would like to break this in half. The first part is going to be the advantages to being a psychopath when it comes to such things as politics, when it comes to relationships, and when it comes to just life in general. Then, in the second part, I'm going to deal with the disadvantages of being a psychopath. Now, you know, when it comes to psychology, well, and everything in life, I guess, has kind of that yin-yang thing going on. You know, there's the good and the bad. There's the plus and the minus. And you sometimes could say all traits are a double-edged sword. And so that's how I'm going to deal with this right now. Later on YouTube, then just go down there into the comments section, and there'll be a link to my official website. Just go ahead and check it out. You might find some interesting reading there. Also, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. So then you'll keep up on upcoming shows that you might miss. And then later you can come back and go, whoa, that's interesting. I want to listen to that. Okay, and while you're at it, go ahead and check out... you can go to Amazon for this. You can check out my new science fiction thriller, and it is called The Destiny of Our Past. Yeah, that's right. The Destiny of Our Past. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit here in a moment, but it's a science fiction thriller set in the era of Noah. Okay? You're probably going, what? That doesn't sound right. Well, check it out and see. Afterwards, you might, I've had some readers go, I never thought of things like that. You may be onto something there when it comes to reality. Okay, so anyway, in that book, actually, and as well as all of my writing, I have at least one, if not more, prototypical psychopaths. In The Destiny of Our Past, there are two prototypical psychopaths, and that are the characters Enlil and Ereshkigal. And in there, one of them is a person that's in charge a lot of security, operates the security apparatus, kind of like the CIA, KGB or whatever of the society. Whereas the other one is a high priestess. And the thing is that both of them are enabled because of being psychopaths. They have this kind of ability to, of course this is in a fictional sense maybe, to be able to get their way and usually to come out ahead. Now, let's take a look at the traits of psychopathy, and then I'm just going to deal with the positive. And then in the second half of the show, I'm going to deal with the negative. All right? So, here we go here. If we just pull up our trusty little psychopathy index, then we find that one of the first things that you'll see listed for psychopaths is glib and superficial charm. Now, there's several aspects to this that enables a psychopath to be able to be charming, kind of in that James Bond sort of way. Yeah, there's another fictional prototypical psychopath. Look it up. So, anyway, essentially it's to be able to engage people, to be charming, and to really butter people up. And not be, self-conscious and always worried about what the other people really are going to think about you. And, I've read so many places where psychopaths can come into a conversation because they don't have that fear complex that a lot of people do, that anxiety that sort of says, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I should try to avoid this situation. Now, this doesn't mean that they're always the one that goes up to the good-looking girl at the dance, okay, when they're in high school. They may not be quite advanced enough to have developed these skills. And these are not just inborn, although there is a genetic tendency. There is a learning process that takes place. You could have a situation where a person is interested in politics, and someone points out the person in the crowd is a congressman or congresswoman. A psychopath will not hesitate to find some way to go up to that person and start chatting with them. And they will quickly, because they can read people's emotions, they can read facial gestures, all of these kinds of things. And they can walk up to that person and act like they just got done with a fly fishing excursion with them in, the Deschutes River of Oregon or something like that. And they can be really buddies. And by doing this, in these kinds of situations, they just get better and better. Now, the interesting thing is that even though they don't have a lot of empathy, which I'll get to in a moment, they can read expressions in their faces. They can tell, especially when you start, showing a certain level of excitement. And so they can quickly tailor, just like, maybe some sort of a social media algorithm. That's a way of describing it I haven't thought of before. Those social media algorithms that try to determine what you are like, what your personality is, so then they can target you for media feed as well as advertisements. Psychopaths can do that just naturally. And so they can be very, very engaging, and also their ability at language is really good. It's that kind of ability that you can just pierce through the clutter, that you can describe language as clutter if you're at a party or something, and not even really have any shyness about what to bring up. So a psychopath can suddenly find out someone's vulnerabilities really fast. I've heard that some psychopaths have this natural ability to get people to start opening up about their lives in very intimate details when just first meeting them. Things they may not share with their husband or wife, they're sharing with this person, because they have this kind of ability to kind of bring it out of you. They got the algorithm going, and they will make you feel good, and they will reward you with flattery as maybe joking and conversation that makes you feel like you're the center of the universe. So glib and superficial charm, the abilities, fantastic. That's why they do so well in politics. That's why they do so well in the media. That's why they do so well in sales. That's why they do so well in being actors and actresses. Okay? So when you turn the TV on, if you've thought about, if someone asks the average person, have you ever seen a psychopath? And they're going, yeah, I've watched the Silence of the Lambs. Not really a psychopath, by the way. Or Dexter. Again, I've had previous shows. Not really a psychopath, in my opinion. Or, any kind of crime drama, with the guy in the basement cutting out all the clippings from newspaper article where he or she has done some horrible deed. Usually not psychopaths. The psychopaths are going to be the people that you're going to see on your news programs. They're going to be, my gosh, you turn on a meeting where it shows the Congress or the Senate, switch on C-SPAN. It may as well be a support group for psychopaths. The only thing they're missing is serving coffee and cake and stuff, and someone saying, hi, I'm Congressman so-and-so, and I'm a psychopath. That's the only thing it's missing. Okay? The only thing. So, think about that sometimes. That's where you see psychopaths. And you have seen many of them. I'm sure you've met them in real life. Maybe your favorite teacher. Maybe your favorite professor. Maybe maybe the guy that saved your grandmother because he was such an expert surgeon. You've met them. But if you really want to see them in action, watch the TV, because it is a peephole into psychopathy. Okay? But not the stuff that comes on as crime dramas, because that's usually not the kind of stuff that really shows the true character of psychopathy. Now, we go to the next one, which is sort of related to this, and that is grandiose self-worth. Actually feeling like, you know what? I'm the star of this show. The whole idea, you walk into a room and suddenly you're like some sort of 12-foot Nephilim. Everyone's got to be paying attention to you. One thing I've heard that psychopaths do not like is to go to a party and no one pay attention to them. Okay? They don't like that. And they also don't like it if they are not the center of attention. So if someone's bragging about they just did something, I don't know, they went whitewater rafting in Siberia on their vacation, they're not feeling so great, because they're feeling like, oh, well, I should have been me. Or they're going to try to find something that's just as spectacular to take the limelight away from that person. This is how, the psychopath sees themselves. They see themselves as someone who has a destiny. They don't see themselves as evil. They may see themselves as the Luke Skywalker, where, they just haven't recognized my Jedi powers yet. Okay? So that's one thing that gives them an advantage, because they don't shoot low. Okay? If they want something, they're going to keep trying and trying and trying. This is why they're good at business. Now, they may foul up, because a lot of times they get too cocky and may invest too much money in some venture and it loses. But then again, if they invest in something that wins, then all of a sudden they're the ones, being on these shows they have, where it shows rich people's mansions and swimming pools and stuff like that on TV. So grandiose self-worth is actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Even though mom and dad may have taught you, no, don't be too hung up on yourself. Well, that's kind of like here. Put this chain on. Okay? Psychopaths don't have the chain. And if mom and dad tries to put it on, they'll rip it off. Okay? The next is a need for stimulation and a proneness to boredom. Well, psychopaths are not going to be the kind of people that want to sit around reading a good book. Oh, they'll read, sure, but their idea of excitement is far greater than the average person. If you give them a choice between whitewater rafting and a nice stroll on the beach, well, they're going to go for the nice stroll on the beach. And if you're in a relationship, I was just thinking how nice it would be to be on a beach right now. No, they're going to be going for the whitewater rafting. And if you throw something in really strange, the psychopath is a guy who might be asking his girlfriend, hey, there's this one trail no one goes to. Let's go nude hiking this weekend. And he'll really sell it. And pretty soon, you got yourself an all-over tan if you're dating Mr. Psychopath or Mrs. Psychopath. Either way. Because they give people that are normally just like living their normal, ho-hum, boring lives, they're giving them excitement and adventure they may never have experienced. So all of a sudden, it's adrenaline rushes. The average person has adrenaline rushes too, okay? And psychopaths can elicit those. But to the psychopath, those adrenaline rush moments are their baseline. That's what they want all the time. Versus, okay, well, once in a while we do something fun or unusual or really weird. Well, they want to do it all the time. And again, that can bring you into ecstasy, or it can wear you out one way or another. But, this is why psychopaths are usually, even when they, you go to all these sites on the internet where people are complaining about, oh, I was married to a psychopath and she did this or he did that. But they'll always admit, oh my gosh, the sex was wonderful, or the adventure was fantastic, he took me to the Himalayas, or she did this, or whatever. And this is an advantage that they have. Now, then you get into the pathological line. And this is not necessarily the person that claims that they went to the moon with a space alien or something like that. Not those big lies. But this could be the ability to take something that is, well, let's just say, it's something that's a little bit unusual, they can embellish it to where it's like, wow, you did this or you've experienced that. They can weasel themselves out of things, which is a real advantage. They use the language again like a weapon. And so they have the ability to, by the time they're done with something, they convince you that you're guilty, okay? Because they can word things so well. Scientists have tried to figure out why they have such good verbal abilities. And at the same time, they also tend to be really, really good in scientific areas too. Usually someone's like really good verbally, but maybe they're not so great in one other area, like, again, mathematics or science or something like that. They seem to be good overall. And so they can do the whole, I did not have sex with that woman. Pause. Monica Lewinsky. Well, the thing is that you realize that he's wording it in such a way that on the face of it, it could be true that he did not have intercourse with Monica Lewinsky. But it leaves open well, wait a minute, let's analyze that sentence. What did he really mean by that? Okay, psychopaths are always like that. They're able to do half-truths. They're able to, they can be extremely truthful, never tell a lie. Doesn't mean, just because you're never telling a lie does not mean you're not telling, just because you're never telling a lie does not mean you're telling the truth, okay? It just depends on how you word things. So that's something that's there. Conning and manipulative. Now, this just basically means, from the advantageous point of view, this just means that a psychopath is able to get their way. They can manipulate. Let's go back to that other example. It sounds silly, but let's go back to the other example. Let's say a guy wants to take his new girlfriend for a nude hike up in, I don't know, let me think. I included this actually in one of my books. Freedom from Conscience, The Price of Power. And where there you have kind of a duel between two female psychopaths. And, they go on this, what you call a spiritual hike. If you're from Oregon, you might understand that. Up in the, what's the name of that? The Pacific Crest Trail. And the thing is that what the psychopath can do is like, it'd be really fun, but they're not going to come right out and say, let's do this. And then the person says, no way, no way am I going to do that. They'll plant the seed. And then once you kind of bite, you say something like, well, that looks like it'd be kind of scary, but I wonder what that would be like. Well, you've bitten. And then they can kind of say, that would be a great idea. Why don't we try it? And then you're thinking, yeah, it would be. And you think all along you're the one that came up with the idea of leaving your clothes behind and going for a 50-mile hike. But the thing is, that's how the psychopath can work. They are able to manipulate situations. It doesn't mean all of them are out there trying to steal Granny's life savings, okay? It mainly means they're able to get their way, whether that's to get a nicer office where they work, or maybe be able to go on a specific assignment for work, or even get their grade up if they feel like their grade was not fairly given. They definitely deserved an A, not a B. And they can usually persuade the teacher to change it to an A. Then you get the lack of remorse or guilt. Now, the thing when it comes to lack of remorse or guilt is the sense that, again, I've said this before, you can have a situation where you may have done something to someone and you feel like, man, I shouldn't have done that. But there's a difference between I shouldn't have done this, it wasn't necessary, and the idea that I'm a bad person because I, as a person, should never have done this. And that's the difference between a psychopath. They don't necessarily go out there just to hurt people. Many of them are very nice people. They would not, hurt you any more than, you walk by your neighbor's tree and feel like, hey, I've got a chainsaw. I wonder what it'd be like to saw my neighbor's tree down. You wouldn't think it. And many psychopaths don't think like, oh, I want to do you harm. Okay? If you stand in their way, they can do you harm and not feel guilt about doing it. But most of the time, it's kind of if you see guilt as a moral, they're kind of like amoral in that sense. They're not going to feel like, oh, well, I really shouldn't have done that, and I need to go pray and get forgiveness from God or something like that. Okay? Psychopaths don't feel that way. So if they do something that hurts you, they may feel like, well, you deserved it. They may feel like you're weak. You shouldn't have been so weak. If they sell you something and later it falls apart, or they buy something, they come to your garage sale and they buy, let's say there's a painting or something, and they knew all along that it was, I don't know, some Picasso or some original or something like that, and they make, millions off of it, and they paid you $5, they're not going to feel guilty about that. Okay? They're not going to be like, oh my gosh, I really hurt that person, and, if they had only known, they won't feel that way. All right? It's like these politicians that lie. There was one politician that he lied about, I'm not going to say who, because then people are going to be thinking, am I saying this person's a psychopath or not? And I don't want to give individual diagnosis or something like that. But he actually commented that he lied about one of the Republican presidential candidates' taxes. And later, when he was called on it, he was just kind of like, well, did he get elected? I mean, seriously. Come on, this is the way all politicians operate. It's easier to kind of ask forgiveness after you've won, okay, than it is to lose and then wonder, well, maybe I should have said this or done that. Okay, this is the way psychopaths work, and that's why they're so successful. So, lack of remorse or guilt. And again, some psychopaths, they cause a lot of pain. Others, they don't. They don't cause a lot of pain. But again, you get into that, what I call amorality when it comes to guilt. And, they may not mean to, but it can still happen. Then you get shallow affect. And, all these things kind of relate to each other. And shallow affect can basically mean the person is kind of like, oh, well, whatever, even though they cause a lot of problems. So they could be working in a company and do really well for the company, and then they do something that really causes a great deal of problems, even the company collapses. They still made it to the top and everything, and they'll be like, well, whatever. But they could still be very, 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 like I said before, charming and joke and laugh and that sort of thing, even though they cause all this kind of stuff. Now, the next one is the whole idea of lack of empathy. And sometimes that can get into not having diplomacy with people, although psychopaths are usually very diplomatic if they're trying to get somewhere with it. Again, the one thing that really engages people with psychopaths, everyone's like, when they meet them, they're like, wow, I just love talking to them. They were the center. They had this magnetic personality about them that just drew people. Well, the thing is that a lot of times that is that aspect of lack of empathy. Again, they're not caring if they offend someone. All right? Because they know that if they say it just right, they can still have fun, and people laugh, and they may be joking about, with some lady that they get kind of interested in and kind of joking about her divorce and, and maybe even putting plants in about it must be so lonely at night now, or something. And, because they have the intention of going home with her that night. But it's still, this lack of empathy means that a person doesn't have those barriers that they just, zipping the mouth or, oops, I shouldn't say that. And often people like it. They see it as a sense of honesty, of being genuine. It might be genuine or it might just be a tactic, okay? But having a lot of empathy does tend to get people tongue-tied, and it does tend to cause people to leave a social situation or a work situation going, I wonder what would have happened if I had said or done this. But then they go to the party or social situation or the work situation the next week, and they still don't say it. And they continue, and they continue, and they continue, and they wonder why this one person, who happens to be a psychopath, is getting all the attention from the bosses and that sort of thing. Okay? And it's not fair, I really care. Well, the psychopath is someone who, again, I'm going to use the Luke Skywalker thing. Shut off the computer. Use the Force. Fly by the seat of your pants. Psychopaths do that. Okay? Although they still are often quite cunning and have an agenda in mind. Now, I'm not going to really deal so much with parasitic lifestyle in this situation, because I'd like to deal with that in the next one. And when it comes to poor behavior controls, again, this is an area where this can go either way. But I'd like to mostly deal with that in the next section. But I will say this. One person's poor behavior controls is another one's thrills. Okay? Those times when you, if you're old enough to remember, you rode in the... you were sitting on the car. I mean, you're in a car, and you get out of. It's driving down the road at a fast pace, and then you get out of the car through the window, and you're sitting on the window, and you're waving at people. That kind of thing. That if you look at your own kids now doing that, you'd be like, you'd have a heart attack. But when you were young, maybe it was thrilling, or maybe you didn't do that. But the thing is, even though that would be seen as poor behavior control, it still would be something that would thrill people or thrill the person doing it. Now, I'm not saying everyone that does that is a psychopath, okay? I'm sure many of you are listening to this who've done things like that, or you've done other crazy things. But most of the time, you evaluate the situation. And, if someone said, hey, how would you like to go on a trip to, I don't know, some war-torn country or something like that? The psychopath is immediately going, yeah! Like, and then they start looking at, what maybe the positives and negatives are, whereas the average person's kind of like, can I think about that? Well, if a boss has some sort of retreat he wants to go to out in the middle of, I don't know, Botswana, and, a lot of people are like, oh, that's really remote. I don't know anything about that area of the world. I don't think I want to do that. And you happen to be a psychopath and you're going, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Why not? Sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. Well, guess what? That's right. They're the ones that get the promotions and get the attention and so forth. So, that's something to consider there. Now, promiscuous sexual behavior. This, again, is one of those things that can go either good or bad. All right? Because you have a situation in which there's an advantage to being able to say the right things to get someone interested in you. I mean, I've known so many people, male and female, they reach their 40s or 50s and they've never been married. But if you see them in a social, and they're really wonderful people, but you see them in a situation where, you have that mating game taking place, and yes, it is a game, just like you would have when it comes to any mammal species, they have a certain courtship ritual, and humans do too. And the ones that don't do so well at it, they don't mate, and they don't produce children who go on to repeat the process. Psychopaths do. Okay? I'll deal with this because it's a double-edged sword. But, psychopath might wind up at the very end of their life. They may wind up with, I don't know, 6, we're talking about in today's modern times where the average person the average couple has 1.3 or 4 kids. The psychopath might have 3 to 4 kids altogether with 2 or 3 wives, or maybe 5 or 6 kids with 3 or 4 wives. Well, they have passed their genes on. That's an advantage. Now, so ultimately, they do have a certain sex appeal too, because of the some people will say that there's a tendency for psychopaths to have a higher level of testosterone. And that they also, because they don't like to be bored, and they do have a narcissistic element to their personality, they like to look good. And so they'll do whatever they need to be attractive at any age. And so, therefore, that helps them in the mating game. And so, if you think about movies where the hero, he gets the girl, and his friend, the sidekick, just gets to be best man for the wedding. So many of those movies from the 50s, right? Where the nice guy, he's the one in the friend zone, so to speak, and he gets to be the guy who's holding the ring for the groom. Well, that's nice. It's a good opportunity to speak, at the wedding and so forth. But guess who goes home with the girl? Not him. So that's something to consider. Now, you get into such things as early behavior problems, which again, that's not something I'd like to deal with in the positive. You do get into the lack of realistic long-term goals. Now, you might think, well, that just means someone's just wandering around. Well, that also means they may be setting goals that are way beyond what the person in their particular social class might be expecting. Okay? If you've got a kid growing up poor in Arkansas or Hawaii or, what was it, Indonesia? Not saying that they are psychopaths, but, a lot of our presidents will make comments that when they were very, very, very young, they were thinking about becoming congressmen, senators, or even presidents. Whereas maybe their friends were thinking about being firemen and policemen and teachers and astronauts and all this kind of stuff. And so sometimes having that unrealistic life goal can be a good thing. Impulsivity, again, that's the idea of doing something at the spur of the moment. That can be seen as, our society likes that. Again, oh my gosh, here's another Star Wars. Think of Han Solo, just doing it, just jumping in in the nick of time to save the day. Not saying, I can't think of really, I wouldn't say Hans or Luke or those guys would be psychopaths. But the thing is that our society really likes that. The idea of the person that just, I need a volunteer and, it's a suicide mission and you're probably not going to come back. And someone jumps up and says, yeah, I'll do it. And they wind up winning and, being a success and everything. So that can have an advantage there. And then you go into such other things that you might think are bad. Failure to accept responsibility. They can often deflect responsibility onto other people. Well, if they're successful, then I guess that's better than, yes, I did it all. The old George Washington, I cut the cherry tree down. Who knows what, first of all, it wasn't a true story, but, you probably expect that his father would give him a good whooping for that. Anyway, many short-term marital relationships, again, we threw in the advantage to that you might wind up causing, creating more reproduction in the process. Therefore, genetically speaking, at least, especially for males, you may have, contributed more in the sense of genetics. And then we go into like juvenile delinquency, which tends to be something that is something that will not be such a good thing, except maybe, I don't know, sometimes there's certain girls that will find the bad boy irresistible. And again, from the genetic standpoint, we all know of situations where, the young woman, when she's 17 or 18, she gets pregnant by the bad boy, and then, later finds herself a nice, good guy to marry, and he raises the kid that was the product of the, I'm just talking from a genetics point of view. Okay? The psychopath, might win in that sense. I don't like it, but I'll deal with that in the next section. In fact, I'll just start, just the same way I did before. Anyway, I'd like to go on to, what I think I'll do here is cut and then go to the second section, which is the disadvantages of being a psychopath. So, okay, like part one, I dealt with the advantages. Now I'm going to deal with the disadvantages. So, anyway, before I go on, again, I'm going to make that repeat. Go down there and check the comments section. I've pinned it, and check out my official website. Lots of articles on psychopathy and other things as well. And check out my new sci-fi book, The Destiny of Our Past. And again, like I said in the first half, the prototypical psychopathic characters are Irish Kagal and Enlil. And so, anyway, let's go ahead here and start again. Now, the disadvantages of psychopathy. Now, first of all, if you look at the first trait, you've got glib and superficial charm. One of the disadvantages of this is, what if you go up against another psychopath? They're going to recognize your superficiality real fast. Okay? You can't have more than... they can get along with each other, but if a psychopath is trying to con another psychopath, it can wind up in a bad situation. Also, in the social media world, having a glib and superficial charm, you might wind up being recorded. And later, some vindictive business partner or girlfriend or something like that may throw in something that shows that you were a liar all along. So that would be a very, very big disadvantage. I am going to jump into some of these other things, though, that psychopathy can be bad at. Now, the fact that psychopaths tend to question any rules put on them. They believe rules are for the weak, for the people who just have to have someone to control them. And this can, at a young age, lead them into juvenile delinquency. Okay? It can cause them to get in trouble because they're not going to see the policeman in the head, the guilt complex coming in and saying, no, this is wrong, you shouldn't do this because it's wrong. And then they just walk away when they have the temptation. They're going to try to figure out if they can get away with it. They're going to try to figure out what they should do. What will be the rewards for doing something? What could be the possible outcomes? Everything's going to be weighed on a cost-benefit analysis. And the smart one, may get away with things or not do something stupid. The less intelligent one may wind up getting in prison pretty quick and winding up someone that has attention of the juvenile delinquency departments. Okay? So this is a problem that many psychopaths have. Now, also, because they tend to lead a lifestyle that is somewhat fragmented, to say the least, they can wind up in situations in which, because of, again, the inability to feel guilt and empathy, they can do a lot of things to harm other people. So the one thing that can wind up happening is they may wind up having had many marriages that broke up, many failed relationships, and of course it's never their fault. It's someone else's fault. And this is true for both males and females. You can have a situation in which you can have a long list of, let me tell you something about him or her. Okay? So I think our society still values the idea of people having stability and having a certain sense of honor. This can actually hurt them. And it can hurt them in their personal lives. It can hurt them professionally. It can hurt them if they ever decide to run for politics. Now, then you get into the idea of irresponsibility. Now, the thing is here, you have a tendency for the person, maybe, or let's just put it again, if you don't have a very strong sense of guilt and empathy, you may have a situation in which you don't see responsibilities in the same way most people do. So if you're younger and you get a job, but yet someone says, hey, let's go do something like this. Let's go, and they have this great, weekend planned at the ski resort or something, but you have to work. Well, you may just call in sick, and then later, you wind up finding out that your boss is at the same ski resort, so you get fired. Now, this is something that many people have done. It doesn't take a psychopath, but a psychopath would do this quite regularly and maybe not learn the lesson. Okay, most people would learn the lesson like, now I'm having to look for another job because, I fouled up here. I'll never do that again. The psychopath will do it again and again and again and again. Okay, so that's a problem with this personality matrix. Anyway, impulsivity. Now, impulsivity is, again, just idea of doing something just at the spur of the moment. And again, it's something that a lot of people like, but at the same time, it's very dangerous. If you don't think about what can happen, if you don't look at all of what the results can be, it may wind up being something that could threaten your life. It could threaten other people. It could threaten your career. It could threaten so much. A person who, spur of the moment, decides, I'm going to use drugs, and then gets caught, even though they knew there was a good chance of getting caught. Well, maybe their goal in life was to become a teacher. And the problem is now they've got something on their record, a drug offense. Chances of becoming a teacher just went way lower. Okay? Or you have these situations where someone is, some girl who, she decides, I need some extra money, and a friend of mine, just got involved was a model and then now is in porn. No one's going to know, and I need a little extra money here and there. And then later, when they're running for mayor of some city and someone happens to notice a great resemblance between one of the actresses and the candidate for mayor, well, that's the end of that. But psychopaths are more likely to do it. Psychopaths will jump in and do the crazy, stupid thing, not really taking a serious note of what could happen. Now, again, many times, I stated in the first half of the show, they will look at things from a cost-benefit point of view. But they can let that proneness to being bored or that sense of no one controls me get the best of them. Very big disadvantages involved there. Now, we also have the thing about promiscuous sexual behavior. I think we can think of a lot of problems you can get with that. You may wind up paying child support, for a very long time. Or you can get a sexually transmitted disease. If you're a female psychopath, you may wind up with a baby that you have to take care of. And this can be a problem. And I would tend to think that even though psychopaths may wind up with, making more babies in the long run than non-psychopaths do, the ones that try to avoid it may not reproduce at all. So it may balance things out. The psychopaths that do wind up having, 3 wives and in the end and 6 children, balance out with the psychopath that never had any children whatsoever. I will note here, when it comes to promiscuity, that female psychopaths are much more likely to use sex as a means of getting somewhere than male psychopaths will. And as I show in my my books, the Freedom from Conscience books, the female psychopath is someone who is often admires someone based on a idea, is on a something that they find beyond emotion. So they might like the idea that someone is smarter than them, and they're really attracted to that. But they also, one thing that has to be noted is a certain level of, I'll use the old term. Nowadays there's so many different terms for, sexual orientations. But basically the old term ambisexuality, which basically is kind of like pansexuality, or it just basically means that the female psychopath tends to be someone who, doesn't let sexual orientation stand in the way. Let's just put it that way. Males can be that way, a little bit more likely than the non-psychopath, but the females very much so. And that's something, again, I incorporate in the Freedom from Conscience books. Now, the irresponsibility idea, the idea that you could wind up falling behind on your bills, you don't show up to work, you think you're too good for a certain job, so you're basically trying to run away, keeping the door locked when the landlord comes by, after you've gone 6 months without paying rent, and that sort of thing. That is a problem. That is a problem many do have. And again, not all. Some have very strong planning abilities, and a sense that they don't want to wind up dependent on other people. But very often, especially when they're younger, they have a harder time dealing with the mundane aspects of human existence. So therefore, they have some problems there. Now, poor behavior controls. Now, this is something that's, again, it's going to range according to the psychopath. One psychopath might be, if their husband's cheating on them, she might, there's a variety of things she could do. She might go and seduce the husband of the woman who's cheating with her husband, just to make a point. She might cut the brakes on the lady's car. She might just try to ruin the person socially in some way, or go after him if it doesn't hurt her position. So the behavior controls, again, that would be more the smarter, cunning psychopath. The less intelligent psychopath, let's say she might just go and wind up in a knife fight with the woman who's cheating on her husband. Or she might just poison her husband or something like that. Never, never mind the consequences. So that's something you have to take a look at there. And so, again, you're talking about, I think the core issues are the lack of guilt and empathy that gets into this. And all the other positive factors that come in, which, too much of a positive thing, like if someone's really good looking or really charming, can actually be a negative thing in many other respects. Now, the parasitic lifestyle, like I said, there are psychopaths. I've read about some who, let's say a guy is not even, he's not really considered, he's never really been with a man or something like that, but he might actually consider living in a gay relationship with someone who's very wealthy or very powerful, or as a stepping stone to get to a better position. So this is this kind of parasitic lifestyle, letting someone else take care of you, letting other people do your work for you. So you have a work situation where you've got someone who gets all the credit but really doesn't do anything. That's parasitic. And it can be it can, really be a problem for the people that do the work. Or you come up with ideas and they take credit for them. Again, that's a type of parasitic lifestyle. But ultimately, this is something that is another disadvantage that the manipulation aspects do bring in. It makes it too easy. Most people would have too much guilt to be that manipulative. Now again, the lack of empathy can cause a person to not be able to really form long-lasting relationships with someone. So it winds up in a situation in which maybe they're only with them for a reason. And then when that reason's over, they're over. And the idea that that would go against most people's ideas of, well, you don't treat people that way. Hardcore psychopaths, they are much more likely to have this. Again, in fairness, there are many psychopaths that have been raised with a very strong code of ethics, so to speak, so they would never do something wrong. Or they may be very religious. But the idea that they could, that they have this empathy, that they can tap into their spouse or their girlfriend or their boyfriend or their best friend or whatever's mind and kind of walk in their shoes does not exist. So it could be cold empathy, which is a kind of sympathy where, something goes wrong. The psychopath might be like, well, that really sucks that happened to you. But they don't feel it. It's kind of that, oh, that's bad. Kind of like when you look at the news and you have absolutely no connection to a person that, I don't know, you find out something bad happened to them out in a country far, far away. You feel like, oh, that's kind of bad that happened. I was just reading an article about some fire that killed a whole bunch of people in Portugal. You don't know who they are. You don't see their faces. You just read that, it's a statistic. That's the way a psychopath will feel, in all aspects of life. Okay? Most people, when they see a face, when they see a person, when they know a person, they do feel. But psychopaths don't have that empathy. So that's a problem. It may actually cut back on their ability to experience the joys of love and bonding and connectiveness. And then it gets into the shallow effect. Again, they may come across as cold because they don't have those strong connecting feelings. And that's a big problem for them. They may not feel it, and they may wonder, why is it that this person cries when they get, their daughter's getting married, and they're crying and just with joy, and they're like, I don't get this. Okay? Because they don't get it. And That's a limitation on being a human being. The idea of being prone to boredom. This gets psychopaths in trouble a lot because they're always trying to figure out something that will give them a thrill. Well, maybe the thrill is cheating with, again, we go back to that example, cheating with their best friend's wife. Or the thrill is stealing something or committing some sort of crime or any number of things. Whereas most people would think, why wasn't that person content? They had a good life. Why did they go ahead and jeopardize it by doing this, this, and this? A lot of times our politicians, if anyone's in the public eye, it's a politician. And you're wondering, why did this politician, why did he go in and, proposition a guy in a bathroom? Or why did this politician, why was he dating 3 different women, and cheating on his wife? Or why did this politician do such and such on the internet? I mean, why would they do such a thing, you think to yourself? Well, maybe it is the fact that they want that thrill. They don't like to be bored. And you add all the other factors in, and, well, you've got yourself a dangerous mix. And then, we get into that grandiose self-worth. Think about what it must feel like for the average psychopath who does not realize their dreams. Maybe the average psychopath wants to be the president or the prime minister or the king or any number of things. Well, most of them won't make it. So therefore, many of them are going to be living in some sort of fantasy world in which they're thinking, what if I'd just done this? What if I'd have just done this? What if my life had been better? What if I could have married a different person? Or what if I could have gone into a different career? Or what if? And they're going to feel like the world cheated them. Okay? It's not going to be because of their characteristics. It's going to be that the world cheated them. And while most people will find a contentment and think, okay, I've lived a pretty nice life, I've, raised my kids right, and I got a home, and I've never been hungry or anything like that, the psychopath is going to be thinking, I should have been king. I should have been the ruler. I should have been this and the most powerful ever. And you see this with the megalomania, the ones that do become successful, and they just want more power or more money or more influence. Anyone that gets in their way, they just want to stomp on them. When you're thinking, why would this person who has all of this going for them want to crush the people around them when it doesn't do them any good? Well, many times it's just because they can, and it gives them a thrill. And, so they take advantage of the situation. So anyway, we're running short on time here. I hope that you've learned something here. If you have any comments, just leave them down in the comment section if you're on chat right now, or put them into the messenger section on the bottom if it's on YouTube later. Yes, there are a lot of positive things about psychopathy, for the person, advantages, and there's a lot of negatives that come into this too. And like I said before, it's a double-edged sword. So when you're looking at your politicians or your media people on TV and actors and actresses and so forth, just remember, not everything's great for a psychopath. Anyway, you all take care now, and I hope you'll tune in next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCYT Productions.